Part 1. The Ghost of $10,000. The Weight of 17. The city was a relentless, grinding machine, and for 7 years I had been one of its unseen gears. My name is Alex, and by the time I was 17, my hands knew the texture of minimum wage desperation better than the soft vinyl of a school library chair. The scent of burnt coffee and recycled oil clung to my clothes, a perpetual uniform that marked me as a worker, not a student. I started at 16, a shadow of a boy slipping out before dawn while the rest of the neighborhood, my family, slept. My life was a carefully constructed fortress of self-sufficiency built upon the rubble of parental neglect. While other boys were mastering calculus or crashing borrowed cars, I was mastering the double shift, the art of studying textbooks under a flickering break room light, and the cold calculation of stretching one paycheck over 3 weeks. School wasn't a right. It was a luxury I purchased on the installment plan. An exhausting juggle of partial scholarships and the sweat equity of a dozen odd jobs. It was a lonely path, but it was mine. Across town, in the house I rarely thought of as home, my younger sister, Clara, was living a life rendered in a different hue, a bright, expensive spectrum of parental devotion. Clara had never known the clock puncher's anxiety. Her Instagram feed was a curated gallery of high thread count existence, a ski trip to Verbier, a designer shopping spree in Milan, a sun-drenched cruise through the Greek Isles. Every perfectly filtered image was a silent, stinging testament to the financial favoritism that had always been the unspoken foundation of our family. My mother, Sarah, was the architect of this disparity, a woman who had somehow convinced herself that in pouring everything into one child, she was fulfilling some grand generational destiny. My father, Richard, was the complicit shadow, always present but eternally absent, his silence an echoing approval of my mother's choices. I harbored no petty jealousy for Clara. She was simply the beneficiary of a corrupted system. My resentment was a deeper, colder thing, reserved for the fact that my parents had forced me into a life of exhausting labor while I was still a child. I was the reliable beast of burden, the one they never had to worry about, precisely because they never did worry about me. They had unwittingly forged me into something hard and capable, a quality they now mistook for needing less. The revelation in the library. My grandfather, Elias Thorne, was the only true beacon of warmth and stability in my world. He was a man built on the old-world values of hard work and honest dealings, a self-made titan whose business, a mid-sized, highly lucrative logistics firm, was his life's monument. He saw the fire in my belly that my parents ignored, but in his reserved, old-school way, he never interfered directly with their parenting, believing family matters should run their course. Until he didn't. The revelation came not in a dramatic confrontation, but in the sterile quiet of his study. 3 years into my solitary odyssey, I was researching a particularly complex business law case for a night class, and grandfather, watching me pore over stacks of books, cleared his throat. "Alex," he began, his voice surprisingly soft. "The tuition money. Did it help?" I looked up, confused. "What tuition, grandfather? The partial scholarship helps, yes, but—" He frowned, a deep, immediate canyon forming between his silver brows. "The $10,000! The trust I set up when you were 13 for university preparation. I wired it directly to your mother's account, earmarked for your advanced classes and tutoring. 10,000. It was meant to be the launch pad for your dreams." The air left my lungs in a cold, sharp rush. $10,000. It wasn't just money. It was time. It was the absence of the 3 agonizing shifts I'd worked every week. It was the full ride that a few more hours of dedicated, focused study could have earned me. It was the path I'd had to crawl on, replaced by the boulevard I was meant to walk. I never received a penny of that, grandfather," I said, the words heavy and metallic on my tongue. "I'd been working full-time since I was 16 to pay for books and fees. All my tuition, every dime, came from my own work and a partial scholarship I fought tooth and nail for." Elias Thorne was a man who rarely showed vulnerability, but the moment the truth settled, his face collapsed. It wasn't anger yet. It was a terrifying blend of hurt and profound betrayal. He looked at the hard-earned exhaustion etched around my eyes and then back at the memory of his trust, ruthlessly exploited. He had given me a golden key, and my mother had stolen it, locking me out in the cold. The reckoning. What followed was not a shouting match, but a seismic event, a quiet, devastating reckoning that fractured the family structure forever. Grandfather didn't need proof. He was a man who dealt with ledgers and banks, and tracing the paper trail of the $10,000 disbursement was trivial. The money hadn't been invested. It hadn't been set aside. It was simply gone, absorbed into the endless stream of Clara's extravagant vacations and designer wardrobes. The confrontation with my father, Richard, was swift and brutal. Grandfather called him to his office the next morning. I wasn't present, but I heard the echo of the explosion in the trembling hands of the housekeeper afterwards. "You stood by and watched him work like a stable boy while your other daughter flew first class on his future?" Elias Thorne's voice was low, devoid of emotion, which was far more terrifying than a scream. "I gave you a life, Richard. I gave you a name, and you let that woman, your wife, rob your own son of his opportunity, then make him pay his own way? You have no honor." The threat was immediate, cold and absolute. Elias Thorne was not a man to bluster. "I am cutting you off. The entire legacy, every penny of the company, the house, the liquid assets. Unless I receive an accounting of that $10,000 and you finally face what you did to your son, I will execute a new will tomorrow morning." My father, a man whose spine had calcified in the comfort of his father's wealth, crumbled. He saw not the injustice done to me, but the imminent loss of his own soft, privileged existence. The outcome was a testament to grandfather's swift, unwavering justice. He didn't just demand restitution, he demanded a rebalancing of the moral scales. That night, a new legal document was drafted, signed, and witnessed. The business, the $14 million core of the Thorne family empire, was restructured. I was 23 years old when I received a certified letter that changed the geometry of my life. It contained the deed and legal instruments making me the majority owner. 70% of Elias Thorne Logistics. The equivalent market value was precisely $9.8 million. My lost $10,000 tuition had been repaid with staggering, poetic overkill. I was given a fortune, not as an apology, but as an acknowledgement of my worth and the immense cost of my self-made journey. I moved out the following week. My father, in his quiet shame, remained in the family home, now a smaller, less important fixture in my mother and sister's gilded cage. My mother and sister, Clara, were now living off the smaller remaining assets, forced to downsize their expectations. A meager justice, perhaps, but a consequence nonetheless. I was finally free, a newly minted millionaire whose greatest asset was not his bank account, but the resilience forged in the furnace of his own betrayal. My life, solitary and controlled, was now mine, entirely. 3 months ago, a beautiful disruption walked into the ordered complexity of my life. Lily. She was sunshine where I was shadow, and for the first time since I was 16, I could see a future that wasn't about work, but about love. We were going to be engaged. But as I began building a future with Lily, the past, in the form of my estranged mother, started to cast a new, inconvenient shadow. She wasn't calling, she wasn't apologizing. She was trying to reconnect through the only avenue she understood, my success. She was sending small, meticulously curated gifts to my new company office, a silent, desperate plea to be near the son who was now worth $10 million, hoping that the money could somehow bridge the chasm of her abandonment. And the silence of my father, whom I still visited, was becoming a heavier burden, a silent question I was not ready to answer.
Part 2. The Price of Redemption and the Silent Loss. The Weight of $10 million. The inheritance of $10 million was not a liberation. It was an isolation. The wealth didn't feel like money. It felt like a heavy suit of armor, alien and uncomfortable. I didn't quit my studies. I doubled down, now driven not by desperation, but by the profound responsibility of grandfather Elias's trust. I took the helm of Elias Thorne Logistics, not as an absentee owner, but as the hardest worker in the building. For 2 years, my life was a blur of spreadsheets, strategic planning sessions, and early morning warehouse visits. I was rebuilding the business from the ground up, infusing it with the grit and humility I had learned working minimum wage jobs. I slept little, ate standing up, and proved to every skeptical board member that the boy who once cleaned tables was now the man who could move mountains of cargo. My life was finally stable, financially secure, yet emotionally rigid, governed by the same meticulous structure I had needed to survive my youth. During this period, the outside world remained a distant echo. The separation from my immediate family was a clean, surgical cut. My father, Richard, was a sporadic presence. I'd visit him in the old house, now draped in a quiet shame, and we'd share a beer in silence, a silence louder than any argument, confirming his complicity, but also his quiet grief over the loss of his father's respect. The letter and the ghost of betrayal. It was during this time, buried under a pile of personal correspondence forwarded from my old address, that I found the letter from my mother, Sarah. It was not the apology I had always half expected, but something far more complex and devastatingly revealing. Alex, I know you despise me. You have every right. But I need you to understand that I was not just acting out of malice, but from a profound emptiness. What I did to you, my son, was the shadow of what was done to me. My brother, your uncle, cheated me out of everything. My parents favored him. They invested his future and left me nothing. No tuition, no stake, but the clear, cold message that I was disposable. I was determined that my own daughters would never feel that abandonment. Clara was my chance to live the privileged life I was denied. I wanted to give her everything I never got, to shelter her from the coldness of my own youth. I thought I was protecting her. In doing so, I didn't realize I was inflicting the same wound, worse, a self-inflicted wound, on you. I saw your strength. I saw that you didn't need me. It was a twisted logic, Alex, but I used your capability as justification for my choices. I realized my mistake the moment your grandfather intervened, but the realization was agony. I failed you. Words are hollow now. I will not approach you with apologies because an apology is too easy. I will prove my sincerity through my work. You will see. I will earn back a sliver of your trust. Your mother, Sarah. The letter didn't absolve her, but it explained her. The wound of neglect was not a new creation. It was an heirloom, passed down a generation, and my mother, damaged, had chosen to repair that wound on Clara by cutting me in the process. I didn't forgive her, but I finally understood the architecture of her failure. This understanding was mirrored, shockingly, by a sudden shift in Clara. The inheritance she had received, the same financial value as mine, had not been given to her to continue her travels. It was given, in Grandfather Elias's final silent lesson, to make her stand on her own feet. She started working part-time, not for fun, but out of necessity, and perhaps guilt. One afternoon, she called me, nervous, halting. "Alex, I was waiting tables last night," she whispered. "My feet hurt, and I realized that's one shift. You did that for years. You were 16. I see it now. I'm trying to build my own business. No more shopping trips. Just work. I wanted you to know." Her words were the first genuine note of remorse I had heard from that side of the family. The betrayal hadn't broken Clara, it had educated her. The engagement and the guardian angel. Just as the old wounds were beginning to scab over, Lily arrived. She was the antithesis of my structured, cautious world, a freelance artist, all vibrant chaos, easy laughter, and intuitive grace. She didn't see the $10 million or the scars of the past. She saw Alex, the man who knew how to fix things and who was desperately afraid of being loved. Our relationship was the calm, deep breath I hadn't realized I needed. She made the vast emptiness of my success feel warm and shared. After 3 months, an impossibly short yet monumentally long time, I knew. We planned the engagement for the upcoming Saturday. Grandfather Elias, my stalwart defender, my mentor, and the silent architect of my current life, was delighted. He saw Lily as the completion of his plan, the one person who could finally teach me to live, not just to survive. 2 days before the engagement party, a call came from the hospital. Grandfather Elias Thorne, the strong, unwavering pillar of my world, the man whose word was law and whose love was absolute, had suffered a massive, sudden stroke. I rushed to his private room. He was conscious, but his speech was slurred. The fire in his eyes banked low. I sat by his side, clutching his hand, telling him about the ring, the party, the future he had built for me. He squeezed my hand, a flicker of that iron will returning. Lily, he managed, a smile fighting its way through the paralysis. She's wonderful, Grandfather, I croaked out. She's everything. He nodded once, eyes closed, peaceful. He died in his sleep later that evening, less than 48 hours before the date set for the engagement to Lily. The shock was profound. It was not just the loss of a loved one, it was the loss of my only true parent, the guardian angel who had swooped in and rewired my reality. The man who had been the source of all my fortune and all of my healing was gone. The engagement party was immediately canceled, replaced by the somber, heavy preparations for the funeral. The joy of a new life was immediately eclipsed by the finality of the old. I was $10 million richer, engaged to the love of my life, and utterly alone in my victory. I stood by the large windows of my office, looking down at the city, the weight of my inheritance suddenly heavier than ever before. The future was mine, but the one man who understood the cost of it would not be there to see me take the next step. My mother and sister were trying to find redemption in their own way, but the gaping hole left by Elias Thorne threatened to pull the new life I was building apart.
Part 3. The Architecture of Peace. The Silence of Solitude. The funeral of Elias Thorne was a monument to his life, a stark, elegant, and deeply moving affair. The entire city's financial elite were present, but my focus was only on the raw, silent grief of my father, the genuine, heavy tears of my sister Clara, and the complicated, muted regret on my mother's face. In the weeks that followed, the $10 million inheritance felt like a meaningless ledger entry. The business was thriving, my personal finances were secure, but the foundation of my emotional security, Grandfather Elias, was gone. The absence of the man who had validated my struggle and restored my birthright created a vacuum that no amount of money could fill. It was Lily who finally helped me articulate the central truth that the inheritance had obscured. Money was the currency of justice, but it was not the currency of life. "Alex," she said one evening, holding my hand as we sat in the quiet vastness of my apartment, "your grandfather didn't just give you a company. He gave you the chance to stop fighting. He removed the obstacle so you could choose peace. If this money and this success keep you chained to the anger of your past, then what was the point of his sacrifice?" Her wisdom was a clear, cold water on the fever of my ambition and my resentment. I looked at the three figures who had, in different ways, betrayed me, and I saw three people now actively trying to redeem themselves. My father, living in quiet contrition, my sister, laboring to build her own honest path, and my mother, sending small, silent proofs of her work, trying to earn back a sliver of trust. They were all wounded, and they were all trying to find their way back to a family that was fundamentally broken. The decision to heal. 6 months after the funeral, I called a family meeting. It was awkward, tense, and silent. We sat in the formal living room of the old house, now smelling faintly of disuse. I didn't waste time on accusation or recrimination. We all lost the only person who truly knew how to be a family. I began, my voice steady. Grandfather didn't just give me the company to punish you, Mom. He gave it to me to ensure I could never be hurt that way again. But the justice is complete. The $10,000 was repaid tenfold. And standing here today, I realize that the property and the money are nothing in front of happiness. I looked directly at Clara, who was holding her breath. Clara, you have worked harder in the last 6 months than you ever did before. You are building something real. Mom, I see your efforts, and I read your letter. The root of this was pain, not just greed. I laid a document on the mahogany coffee table. I've decided to restructure the inheritance. I will retain the full 70% ownership of the business and its operational assets because that is where my work is. But the liquid assets, the $10 million equity value, will be split. 50% for me and 50% for Clara. Clara burst into tears, shaking her head. Alex, no, I don't deserve it. You earned it. We are trying to find happiness, I repeated gently. And happiness is not found in keeping score. It's found in releasing the chains of the past. This money came to me because of your wrongdoing, but I won't let it define my future or yours. It's time to build a new foundation, one based on shared prosperity and respect, not scarcity and favoritism. My mother finally spoke, her voice thick with emotion. You are more like your grandfather than I ever realized, Alex. Forgive me. I didn't say, I forgive you. I said, let's try. The double engagement. 6 months later, the tension had evaporated, replaced by a cautious, tentative peace. My father was finally moving toward retirement, my mother was working on herself, and Clara had not only embraced her new financial stability, but used it to grow her small, honest business. And then the celebration, a double engagement. Clara, who had found her own grounding and met her partner 4 months ago, would be engaged alongside Lily and me. It was a symbol of the family not just repaired, but fundamentally rebooted. The date was set, the future was bright, and the old wounds were finally scars. On the morning of the engagement party, my grandfather's estate lawyer arrived at my office. Alex, he said, handing me a sealed, heavy manila envelope. Your grandfather left this for you. He gave me strict instructions that it was to be delivered 6 months after his passing and only if you found peace. I opened the envelope. Inside was a secondary will amendment detailing a non-business asset and a handwritten letter. The document bequeathed his personal residence, the beautiful, sprawling property overlooking the harbor, to me. It was a property he had always cherished, a place he called his sanctuary. The letter, however, was the true treasure. It was filled with memories of our quiet talks, his pride in my tenacity, and his understanding of my yearning for a life unburdened by conflict. He wrote, My dearest Alex, if you are reading this, the storm has passed. I gave you the shield of wealth, but I prayed you would discard it once you found the true armor, serenity. I knew by the way you lived that you sought something deeper than revenge or power. You seek peace. I leave you my home as not a dwelling, but as a monument to that peace. It is the place where I was happiest, where the noise of the world finally fell silent. It is now yours to fill with the warmth and love that was unjustly stolen from your childhood. Keep this truth close to you always. True wealth is measured not by what you own, but by what you can walk away from and still feel whole. Go, Alex. Find your quiet harbor. Build your life and be happy. Elias. I put the letter down, the paper trembling in my hand. He saw it all. He knew my heart. He hadn't just secured my financial future, he had gifted me the final architectural piece of my emotional one. That evening, as I stood with Lily, Clara, and her fiancé, surrounded by the new, imperfect, and loving family we were all committed to building, I finally felt it, the quiet, steady hum of wholeness. The weight of 17 had been lifted, replaced by the boundless, beautiful weight of love and choice. The end.